They mocked the veteran for the strange house he built with his loyal dog, calling it a coward's bunker sunk into the desert floor. But one day, his dog stopped at a wall deep in the cellar, refusing to leave, as if it sensed something hidden right there in the earth. And when the heat wave the town of Copperwash never saw coming finally arrived, the house they laughed at became the only thing keeping people alive. What did the dog uncover? And what did the old soldier know before everyone else? Stick with us to the end. And if you find a little hope in this story, give it a like and let us know where in the world you're watching from tonight. Sam Rourke had chosen this particular piece of sun-scoured land outside Copperwash, New Mexico, for reasons the town couldn't fathom. It wasn't pretty. It was a wide, dusty flat of creosote and grama grass, where the horizon shimmered and the sky was a hard, unforgiving blue. At 48, the retired Navy SEAL moved with a deliberate economy that wasted no motion. His body still a tool honed by 2 decades of service in places that made this desert look like a garden. His companion in this self-imposed solitude was a German shepherd named Scout, a dog with the same quiet discipline as his master. Scout's ears were always listening, his dark eyes missing nothing, his presence a silent, steady warmth at Sam's side. The people in town saw a man and his dog, but what they really were was a single, watchful unit. The house was the source of the town's amusement. It wasn't a cabin so much as an earthwork. Sam had brought in a crew with an excavator for 1 week and then sent them away, finishing the rest himself over 2 years. He'd sunk the main living structure 10 feet into the ground, its thick concrete walls insulated by the unyielding soil. Only the roof, a low-angled plane of metal and solar panels, and a small, sturdy entryway were visible from the dirt road. To the locals, it looked like a man preparing for a war that wasn't coming, a prairie dog hiding from the sky. They called it the Hole, or Rourke's Folly. What they didn't see were the systems, the intricate, thoughtful engineering that made it a sanctuary. The air inside was cooled not by a power-hungry AC unit, but by a network of geothermal pipes that circulated air deep in the earth, where the temperature was a constant 55 degrees, before venting it silently into the rooms. A deep well, powered by a dedicated solar pump, fed a massive insulated cistern buried even deeper than the house, ensuring a supply of cool, clean water that was gravity-fed, needing no electricity to reach the taps. The pantry was a cool, dark room lined with shelves of preserved food, and a small, sealed chamber held medical supplies and tools. Light came from low-wattage LED strips, also solar-powered, that cast a calm, steady glow, and from the sun tunnels that piped natural light down from the surface. Every detail was a testament to foresight, a quiet argument against the fragility of the world above. At the back of the main cellar, past the pantry, stood a heavy oak bookshelf filled with worn paperbacks on engineering, history, and botany. It looked solid, permanent, but Sam knew it was the one part of the house he hadn't built himself. It had been there in the original homesteader's crumbling foundation, and he had simply built around it, a silent monument to a life lived here long before. The mockery from the town was never cruel, not really. It was the easy, thoughtless humor of people who believed they understood the land because they'd been born on it. The loudest voice belonged to Dale Harding, a rancher in his 50s whose face was a roadmap of sun and wind. Dale ran a few hundred head of cattle on the sparse grasslands and believed that toughness was measured by how much heat a man could endure. He'd see Sam in Copperwash, loading bags of concrete or lengths of copper pipe into his old truck, and call out from across the street, his voice booming with false friendliness. "Still diggin' to China, Rourke? Afraid of a little sunshine?" His friends, mostly other ranchers, and the handful of men who spent their afternoons at the town's only bar, would laugh along with him. They were good men, in their way, men who would help a neighbor with a broken-down truck or a fence that needed mending. but they had a fixed idea of how life should be lived out here. On the surface, in defiance of the elements, not hidden away from them. Sam would just offer a quiet nod, pay for his supplies, and drive away. He never explained, never defended his choices. He knew it was pointless. You couldn't explain the feel of a failing generator in a Baghdad hospital, or the thirst of a long desert patrol to men whose biggest worry was a well pump running slow. There was one person in Copper Wash who never laughed. Elena Garcia ran the general store her grandfather had built. She was a widow. Her husband lost to a sudden illness years ago, and she carried a quiet sorrow that gave her a deep well of empathy. She saw the steady purpose in Sam's eyes, the way he measured and planned, and it reminded her of the quiet way her own father had prepared for the harsh winters of her childhood. She'd watch him load his truck and see not paranoia, but a profound sense of duty. "He's not hiding from something," she told Dale once, her voice soft but firm. "He's preparing for it." Dale had just snorted, shaking his head. "Preparing for what, Elena? The sun's been coming up every day for 1,000,000 years." Back in his cool, subterranean home, Sam would sometimes stand before the old oak bookshelf. He'd run a hand over the spines of the books, his fingers tracing the worn titles. He hadn't touched it much since he'd finished the build, but there was a weight to it, a sense of history that felt different from the rest of the house. Scout would often lie at his feet, but lately the dog had taken to sitting and staring at the bookshelf, sometimes letting out a low, questioning whine. Sam would scratch the dog's ears, puzzled, but dismiss it. It was just an old piece of furniture, a relic of the past he'd respectfully left untouched. But Scout's quiet insistence was a seed of curiosity, planted in the back of his mind, waiting for the right moment to grow. The reason Sam prepared was etched into his memory, a collection of moments that the men in town could never comprehend. It was the silent, disciplined waiting before a mission, where every piece of gear had to be perfect because a single failure could cascade into catastrophe. It was the memory of a water purification unit breaking down in a hostile climate, turning a routine operation into a desperate struggle for survival. He had seen firsthand how quickly the thin veneer of civilization could be stripped away, how reliant modern life was on fragile, interconnected systems. He didn't fear a dramatic apocalypse. He respected the simple, brutal math of resource depletion. Water, power, cooling, these were not givens, but luxuries. His time in the SEALs had not made him paranoid. It had made him a realist. It had taught him that true strength wasn't about enduring hardship, but about having the foresight to avoid it altogether. And beneath the discipline was a deeper, more personal reason. The memory of his father, a stoic farmer who had lost everything in the Dust Bowl, a man who spoke in quiet aphorisms about respecting the weather and never trusting a single good season. His father had taught him that the earth keeps its own time, and its cycles of plenty and want were far longer and more powerful than a single human lifetime. One evening, Scout's quiet curiosity about the bookshelf escalated. The dog stood before it, whining, and then placed a paw firmly on the wood, looking back at Sam with an unmistakable urgency. This was not idle behavior. It was a signal. Sam had learned to trust the dog's instincts implicitly. He knelt, running his hands along the base of the heavy oak unit, feeling for a draft, a loose board, anything. Nothing. He tried to nudge the bookshelf, but it was immensely heavy, seeming to be fixed to the wall. He brought a pry bar from his workshop, and with considerable effort, managed to lever one side away from the concrete. As it moved, a cascade of dust and grit fell, and a gust of cool, musty air flowed out from behind it. There, set into the concrete, was a heavy, iron-ringed door he had never known existed. It took him another hour to work the rusted hinges free, the sound of screeching metal echoing in the quiet cellar. When the door finally swung inward, it revealed a set of steep stone steps leading down into darkness. At the bottom, a vast hand-dug cistern, cool and dry, opened up, its stone walls a testament to years of forgotten labor. And on a small, dusty shelf carved into the rock sat a tin box. Inside was a leather-bound journal and a single sealed envelope. The letter, written in a shaky but clear hand, was from the original homesteader, dated 1934. "If you are reading this," it began, "then you have found my last hope. The cycles of this land are long. The sun is not our friend. It gives life, and it takes it away. Every 50 years or so, it comes for everything. The wells go dry, the cattle die, and the sky turns to brass. This cistern is your only chance. Fill it when the rains are good, and guard it with your life. Do not let them tell you you are a fool for living in the earth. The earth is what will keep you when the sky tries to kill you." Sam read the words, and a deep, quiet understanding settled over him. He was not the first to see the truth of this place. He was just the next link in a long chain of preparation. In the weeks that followed, Sam began to see the signs, the subtle warnings the homesteader's journal had described. The town of Copper Wash, comfortable in its routine, saw nothing. But Sam, his senses sharpened by experience and now guided by the old man's words, saw everything. The air itself felt different, thinner, with a brittle quality that stole the moisture from his throat. The horizon, which usually had a soft, dusty haze, was now stark and sharp, the distant mountains seeming unnervingly close. The animals were the clearest tell. He noticed the coyotes were hunting later into the night and retreating earlier in the morning, their movements tight and desperate. The jackrabbits, normally bold, were hunkered down in the deepest shade they could find, barely moving even when he drove past. Scout grew more and more restless, pacing the cool concrete floors of the house, his ears twitching at sounds Sam couldn't hear. The dog would often stand at the entrance, sniffing the air with a low growl, as if sensing an approaching enemy. Following the old journal's instructions, Sam intensified his preparations. He bought a new, more efficient pump and worked for 3 days straight, transferring water from his well to the massive hidden cistern until it was brimming full. He checked the seals on every door and window, caulking any hairline crack he could find. He doubled his stock of non-perishables, buying canned goods, grains, and dried beans from Elena's store. She was the only one who noticed the change in his routine. "Expecting a long winter?" she asked gently, her eyes full of unspoken questions. "Something like that," Sam replied, his voice even. He didn't want to alarm her, but he gave her a quiet warning. "Make sure you have extra water stored, Elena, more than you think you'll need, and keep it somewhere cool." She looked at him, her gaze steady, and saw the absolute seriousness in his face. She nodded slowly. "I will, Sam. Thank you." Dale Harding saw him loading the water jugs into his truck and couldn't resist a final jab. "Stocking up for the apocalypse, Rourke? You know you can just turn on the tap, right?" Sam just looked at him, his expression unreadable, and said nothing. He was done with words. He was moving into a phase of pure action, a quiet, methodical race against a clock only he could hear ticking. The sky was beginning to take on a pale, milky white sheen, a sign the journal had called the sun's fever. It was coming. The heat arrived not like a sunrise, but like an oven door swinging open. The first day, the temperature hit 110 degrees Fahrenheit. The people of Copper Wash grumbled, turned up their air conditioners, and went about their business. The second day, it was 115. The power grid, strained beyond its limits, began to flicker. By the third day, the thermometer at Elena's store read 121 degrees in the shade, and the town's main transformer blew with a loud pop, plunging Copper Wash into a sweltering, powerless silence. This was no longer just a heat wave. It was a siege. The asphalt on the main street grew soft and sticky. The air was so hot it was painful to breathe, a physical weight that pressed down on the lungs. Inside their homes, people fought a losing battle. With no AC, the houses became convection ovens, their interiors quickly soaring past 100 degrees. The water in the town's reservoir, exposed to the relentless sun, grew warm and began to evaporate at an alarming rate. The pumps that fed the water tower were silent. Soon, the taps sputtered and ran dry. Panic, a creature that had been sleeping soundly in the heart of the town, began to stir. Inside his subterranean home, Sam Rourke lived in another world. The air was a cool and pleasant 70 degrees. The lights glowed steadily, powered by the same sun that was torturing the world above. The tap in his sink delivered a stream of cold, clean water from the gravity-fed cistern. He moved through his quiet routines, feeding Scout, checking his systems, listening to the shortwave radio for news of the outside world. The reports were grim. The heat dome was massive, stalled over the entire Southwest, and there was no relief in sight. He felt no sense of vindication, no pleasure in being right. Instead, a deep, quiet ache settled in his chest. He thought of the people in town, of Elena, even of Dale Harding and his family. He thought of their pride, their dismissal of his preparations, and he knew it was born not of malice but of a kind of innocence, a belief that the world would always be as it had been. He had lost that innocence long ago. He stood at the bottom of his entry stairs, his hand on the heavy, insulated door, and listened. There was no sound, but the low hum of his ventilation fans and the faint, oppressive shimmer of the heat outside. He was safe, he was prepared, but he was alone. And he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that it wouldn't last. Sooner or later, the world would come knocking. The first to come was Dale Harding. Sam saw him through the periscope he'd installed in the entryway, a small military-grade device that gave him a clear view of the surrounding land. Dale wasn't walking. He was stumbling, his face flushed a dangerous mottled red, his wife, Sarah, leaning heavily on him. Their teenage daughter trailed a few steps behind, her face pale and listless. They had made it halfway up the dirt track to his house before Dale collapsed to his knees. Sam didn't hesitate. He opened the heavy door, and the cool air from within rushed out like a living thing. Scout stood at his side, hackles raised for a moment, before Sam gave a low command. And the dog relaxed, his posture shifting from guardian to observer. Sam walked out into the brutal, shimmering heat, the sun hitting him like a physical blow. He helped Dale to his feet, the rancher's proud body now limp and unresisting, and guided the family inside. The moment they crossed the threshold, the relief was so profound it was almost painful. Sarah gasped, tears streaming down her face. Their daughter sagged against the cool concrete wall. Dale just stood there, swaying, his eyes struggling to adjust to the dim light, the shock of the cool air rendering him speechless. Sam didn't say a word. He didn't say, "I told you so." He simply handed each of them a tin cup of cold water from the tap. Dale drank his in 3 desperate gulps, the water spilling down his chin. He looked at Sam, his eyes filled with a shame so deep it was heartbreaking. "Rourke, Sam," he stammered, his voice raspy. The well ran dry. The house, it's too hot. We had nowhere else to go." Sam just nodded, his expression calm and patient. "I know," he said quietly. "Rest now. There's food. There's more water. You're safe here." He showed them to a small, spare room, where they collapsed onto the simple cots. Within an hour, others began to arrive. Elena Garcia was next, looking tired but composed, bringing with her 2 elderly neighbors who couldn't have survived another day. Then came families with small children, their faces streaked with sweat and fear. Each time the story was the same. The heat was relentless, their homes were unbearable, and the man they had once mocked as a fool was their only hope. Sam welcomed them all, his movements efficient and reassuring, the quiet center of a storm of desperation. His home, built for one, was becoming an ark for a whole community. For 5 days the sun beat down on Copper Wash, but within the cool, earthen walls of Sam's home, a new kind of community took root. The initial shock and desperation gave way to a quiet, collaborative rhythm. Sam, who had spent years in solitude, found himself the de facto leader of a small village of 30 souls. He never gave orders, but people naturally looked to him, following the example of his calm competence. He organized a simple rationing system for the food and water, ensuring everyone had what they needed. The massive cistern, the secret legacy of the old homesteader, held strong, its supply of cool water seeming almost miraculous. Dale Harding, his pride replaced by a profound and humbling gratitude, became Sam's most dedicated lieutenant. He used his rancher's knowledge of resource management to oversee the water distribution, his booming voice now used to gently remind people to conserve, his eyes holding a new, quiet respect every time he looked at Sam. Elena Garcia took charge of the pantry, organizing meals with a gentle efficiency that soothed frayed nerves. The women gathered around her, preparing simple, nourishing food, their quiet conversations a soft murmur that filled the common area. The children, recovering quickly in the cool air, found a corner to play, their hushed laughter a sound of impossible normalcy in the midst of the crisis. Even Scout found a new role. The watchful guardian became a silent comforter, moving among the families, resting his head on the knees of the anxious, and allowing the children to gently stroke his thick fur. One evening, as Sam was checking the battery levels on his solar array, Dale approached him, his hat held in his hands. He stood in silence for a long moment before finally speaking, his voice thick with emotion. "Sam," he said, not quite meeting his eyes, "I was wrong about you. I was a fool. I laughed because I didn't understand. What you built here, it's not a bunker. It's a lifeboat. You saved my family. You saved all of us." Sam looked at the man who had been his most vocal critic and saw not an enemy, but just a man who had been humbled by a power greater than himself. He put a hand on Dale's shoulder. "We saved each other, Dale," he said. "And that's all that matters." In the shared work and quiet generosity of those days underground, the old mockery evaporated, replaced by a bond forged in the cool, life-giving dark. On the morning of the 6th day, the world changed. A cool breeze, the first in what felt like an eternity, whispered down the ventilation shaft. Sam went to the periscope and saw a sight he thought he might never see again. Clouds. Heavy, gray, pregnant with moisture, they were rolling in from the west, a beautiful, bruised army advancing against the tyranny of the sun. An hour later, the first drop of rain struck the metal roof with a loud ping, and a collective gasp went through the shelter. People crowded at the base of the entryway stairs, listening to the growing drumming above. When the downpour began in earnest, a ragged cheer went up. The siege was broken. The heat wave had passed. Cautiously, the people of Copper Wash emerged from Sam's home, blinking in the soft, gray light, turning their faces up to the glorious, life-giving rain. The town they returned to was battered but intact. The heat had taken its toll on the land, but not on the people. Thanks to one man's foresight, not a single life had been lost. In the weeks and months that followed, Copper Wash was a different place. The experience had shaken them, but it had also united them. The easy mockery was gone, replaced by a sober respect for the power of the land and the wisdom of preparation. At a town meeting, led by a humbled and determined Dale Harding, They made a decision. They would not be caught unprepared again. They pooled their resources, buying a new, more robust transformer for the town. They invested in a project to cover the reservoir to reduce evaporation. But the biggest change was personal. Inspired by Sam's example, families began to build their own small root cellars, reinforcing their homes against the heat and installing rainwater catchment systems. They came to Sam not for orders, but for advice, which he gave freely and quietly, teaching them the principles of geothermal cooling and passive water collection. His folly had become their blueprint for survival. Years passed. Sam Rourke remained on his land, a quiet, respected elder in the community that had once laughed at him. Scout grew old, his muzzle turning a soft, dignified gray, his steps slower but his gaze as loyal as ever. He was a fixture at Sam's side until the very end. Sam passed away peacefully in his sleep one cool desert night, 15 years after the great heat wave. The entire town turned out for his memorial. They didn't bury him in the town cemetery. Instead, with a quiet reverence, they laid him to rest on his own land, a small, simple stone marking the spot. The house he built was maintained by the community, a permanent emergency shelter and a monument to the man who saved them. Dale Harding, now an old man himself, carved a simple sign and placed it at the start of the dirt road leading to the house. It didn't say Rourke's Folly. It said, "The Rourke House, a good neighbor's foresight." The strange choice of a man the town misunderstood, a choice guided by a letter from the past and the instincts of a loyal dog, had become the enduring legacy that saved the whole valley, a quiet testament to the idea that the deepest strength often grows in the places hidden from the sun. It's a powerful thing to consider how often the world overlooks the very people who are quietly preparing a refuge for others. The ones who seem strange, the ones who don't follow the crowd, are sometimes the ones placed in our lives for a reason we can't yet see. Their quiet work, their steady preparation, is often a form of love, an act of faith in a future that others refuse to consider. It asks us a gentle question. Who in our own lives are we underestimating? Who is the quiet builder we've been too quick to judge? We hope this story brought a little warmth to your heart. If it did, we'd be so grateful if you'd like, share, and subscribe. Please let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Be well, be kind to one another, and may you always have the wisdom to see the strength in those who walk a different path. God bless.